Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an impressive story full of mystery. Let's meet Dr. Celestine Rayner, a skeptical doctor who died suddenly during a shift and spent 5 minutes clinically dead. But what she saw on the other side will leave you speechless. She had an encounter with a divine presence, discovered shocking truths about what happens to the dead, and came back with an urgent revelation that could change everything you believe about life and death. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now get ready, because this journey is intense, transformative, and completely real. My name is Celestine Rayner, an emergency room physician at St. Mirabel Medical Center in Phoenix. At 38, I had seen more deaths than I care to count. Men, women, children, they all disappeared before my clinical eyes, while I executed maneuvers and protocols with professional coolness. The pain of others went through me, of course, but I learned to deal with it. It was necessary. Medicine taught me that the body is a machine, flawed, finite, predictable, and I believed it with every cell of my being. There was no room for spirituality in my life. I grew up with atheist parents, biology and physics teachers. I was never baptized. I never joined a church other than out of social obligation. For me, God was an outdated concept, created to comfort fragile minds. Science was my religion. The stethoscope, my rosary. Laboratory tests, my Bible. Don't think I was cold. I cared about my patients. I just didn't think there was anything more. When someone died, I sighed, took off my gloves, and moved on to the next person. Nothing but biology. And the end, it was just that. The end. It was dawn when everything started to change, a shift like any other. The hospital was relatively calm, at least until that moment. I was reviewing the records of a patient who had survived a motorcycle accident while drinking cold coffee. I was tired, but used to that routine. No clue, no omen, just the normality of another night shift. Then, as if someone had pulled an invisible thread inside me, I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. The pain came like a bolt of lightning, cutting off my breath, crushing my sternum. I dropped the mug. It crashed to the ground, but the sound seemed distant, muffled. I tried to get up, but my knees gave way. I fell onto my side, face against the icy floor of the break room. Lights flickered, consciousness faded, and there, in the silent dawn of the Arizona desert, the woman who believed in nothing died. I vaguely remember voices, hurried steps, something cold pressing against my neck. They must have been checking my carotid pulse. I heard someone shout my name. "Celestine, Rayner, listen to me." It was Elijah. I would recognize that voice anywhere. I tried to respond, but my mouth wouldn't move. I was trapped in a body that no longer obeyed. I felt something sink inside me, like I was falling into a bottomless hole, but I was still conscious. My senses were blurred, as if I were submerged in water. A voice said, "She's in fibrillation. Charge the defibrillator. Now." It was all surreal. I was the doctor. I was the one who made these orders, who commanded the chaos. And now it was you, the patient, in the eye of the storm. The initial pain was gone. It wasn't relief. It was absence. Something was being turned off inside me, one by one. My heartbeat, my breathing, my body perception. Then came darkness. Not the one made out of fear or despair. It was something absolute, a thick silence, a gentle switch off. My diagnosis afterwards was clear: massive pulmonary embolism. A silent clot, coming from a genetic mutation that I was unaware of until that moment, blocked the main pulmonary artery. My overloaded heart collapsed. Complete cardiac arrest. Straight line on the monitor. No vital signs for exact 5 minutes. Elijah and the others fought for me with an intensity I didn't know I deserved. Adrenaline, cardiac massage, defibrillation. They tried everything. But to them, there in the room, it seemed like they were losing me. And indeed they were. But I wasn't there anymore. It was at that moment, between the last pulse of the heart and the first shock from the defibrillator, that everything began to change. The life I knew was over, and the impossible was about to happen. I don't know when exactly it happened. There was no snap, no portal, no warning. I only realized that I was no longer part of that body stretched out on the stretcher. I was above, floating, suspended in the air, as if gravity no longer had control over me. I looked down, and it took me a second to understand what I saw. My body, there, stiff, pale, covered in sweat. The lab coat is open, monitors beeping in constant alarm. Elijah pressed my chest with both hands, steady rhythm, tense gaze. 2 nurses took turns administering medication and the manual ventilator. I saw the reflection of my face on a monitor in the background, eyes half closed, lifeless. What should have been terrifying wasn't. I felt a calm so profound it bordered on the sacred. No pain, no fear, no anguish, just peace. Up there, everything made sense. I knew I was dead or close to it, but it didn't matter. It was as if, for the first time, I was free from the prison of the senses. The physical pain, the tiredness, from years of shifts, the weight of decisions I carried for so long, everything disappeared like smoke. I tried to speak, but I had no voice. I tried to move, but I had no arms. Still, there was movement. A fluidity, as if I were part of the air itself. My thinking was clear, but much faster. There was no time. There, at least not time as we know it. I absorbed everything at the same time, voices, emotions, intentions. I saw the tear run down Elijah's face. He never cried. It was strange to see how much these people cared. Colleagues who had previously seemed cold were distressed. In death, I realized the value I had in their lives. And still, I didn't want to go back. Not out of contempt, but because where I was, it was infinitely better. And then, without warning, something changed. An invisible force began to pull me. It wasn't sudden, it was firm, as if the universe itself had decided that I had to move on, and I went. The emergency room began to dissolve around me. Like paint being washed away by a light rain, the walls, the sounds, the bodies of my colleagues became shadows. The light on the monitors blinked one last time before disappearing completely. And then silence. Not an uncomfortable silence. It was absolute. Alive. An absence of noise so profound that it seemed to contain answers. I floated without knowing where I was, but I didn't feel lost. The space around me was not dark in the human sense of the word. It was dark, welcoming, like a warm blanket that enveloped me. There was no direction, but I felt like I was being led, as if something was guiding my every movement with millimeter precision. I didn't fight it. For the first time in years, I allowed myself trust. Not in science, but into something much bigger. Up ahead, if there was a front, a spark appeared, a small but living light. It pulsed with its own brilliance. As I approached, it grew larger, as if it knew I was coming. An energy began to emanate from that light, penetrating everything, including me. It was hot. It was love. But not the love we know as emotion. It was a essence. That silent call hit me with a force that made me cry, if I still had tears. There was no sound, but I felt a call. Come, you are expected. And I went. The light grew, expanded around me, dissolving any memory of the physical world. I didn't think about Phoenix. I didn't think about the hospital. Not on my body, not on my diplomas. Everything seemed so small, as if everything I thought was important had been just the prologue of something infinitely bigger. I crossed the threshold and felt something pass through within of me. It was like being reborn, but instead of blood and screams, there was only silence. light, and the clear feeling of coming home, not leaving. That's how I left death behind and entered the early life. The light enveloped me completely. It wasn't like being in front of something, it was like be part of that. I didn't see with my eyes, I didn't hear with my ears. Everything was direct, immediate, profound. It was as if every atom of who I was absorbing the reality around. Suri, and then he appeared. I don't know if it was a she, actually. It had no body, face, or name, but there was an indescribable familiarity. That presence knew me. Not in a superficial sense, but on such an intimate level that it exposed me completely, and yet I felt no shame. I felt understood, loved, accepted. Every mistake I made, every lie I told, every act of harshness, everything was there, clear, before her. And yet, there was no judgment, had absolute love. It was the kind of love that doesn't charge, doesn't condition, doesn't demand transformation, but that, because it's so pure, naturally transforms. I felt like I was being rebuilt just by being in front of her. The presence transmitted a wordless message to me. It was as if I remember something I always knew but had forgotten. She said, or rather I understood, that my journey was not yet over. It's not your time yet, she communicated with absolute clarity. But before you go back, there is something you need to see. And at that moment I was enveloped by a kind of golden veil, as if the light itself opened before me, creating a new reality. The presence did not leave any distance. It was still with me, inside and around. She was everything, and at the same time, it left me free to understand for myself. There was infinite wisdom there, an intelligence that didn't need to prove anything. And I, the skeptical doctor, proud of what I knew, found myself so small in front of her, but not insignificant. The presence made me feel essential, as if each life were a single note in an eternal symphony. And it was in that sacred silence that something began to dawn before me, my entire life, ready to be revealed. Before me, a kind of floating panorama appeared. It was not a screen, nor a memory. It was more vivid than that. I revive each moment as if he were inside them again, but with an expanded consciousness, able to also perceive what others were feeling. It started in childhood. I saw my mother teaching me to read, my father carrying me on his shoulders, through burning autumn trees. I saw the day when I promised myself at 8 years old that I would never depend on anyone. A promise that would shape everything that came after. Each scene flowed into the next like a river, but not chronologically. It was emotional. I saw the smile I gave to a dying patient in the hallway, thinking it meant nothing. But the energy of that gesture reverberated. That man smiled back, and this gesture calmed his wife, who then decided to visit the daughter she hadn't spoken to in years. It was like that, like waves. Each choice I made generated others. But it wasn't just the good deeds. I also saw it when I ignored the silent crying of an intern, embarrassed after a mistake. I corrected him coldly, thinking it would teach him to be strong. But he took it as a humiliation, and his passion for medicine gradually withered. I never knew, and even in those moments, there was no condemnation. The divine presence was still with me, watching everything. He didn't judge me, just showed. It gave me the chance to understand, and the more I saw, the more my heart opened. There was no way I was going to come out of this review being the same person. The most impactful scene was simple, me holding the hand of an elderly patient who was afraid of dying. I was exhausted that day, but I stopped, smiled, and listened to her. She died that night peacefully. I saw how that changed not only the end of her life, but also her granddaughter's decision to become a doctor. A phrase echoed inside me, from the presence itself. Nothing is small. Every gesture carries light or shadow. And at that moment, I began to understand that life is not a succession of events. It is a network of choices that shapes destinies. The review of my life gently melted away, like fog in the sun, and the space around me expanded. The presence was still with me, but now there was a new kind of silence. It was like standing on top of an invisible mountain, looking at something too vast to immediately understand. Then, the future appeared before me. First, a dark scene. I saw dense, opaque cities where the sky was as thick as smoke. People walked silently, disconnected, staring at bright screens with blank eyes. There was no contact, no compassion, no time to look into each other's eyes. Loneliness was the common language. I saw children being born in cold environments, raised by machines. I saw fear as the engine of the world, fear of losing, of making mistakes, of trusting. The images came in waves without sound, but with a profound impact. I felt the weight of collective selfishness. I saw wars fought not for territory, but for control of information. I saw the sick land. Water is scarce, the blunted human soul. And then, the contrast. The light changed. A new scenario was formed like an alternative reality. It was the world we could have. I saw communities where people looked out for each other. I saw hospitals where healing came from touch and empathy, not just machines. I saw schools where children learned to listen to themselves, to feel, to connect. I saw regenerated forests, clean rivers. I saw technology as an ally of life, not as a substitute for the soul. I saw humble leaders. I saw forgiveness as a revolutionary act, and I understood something that changed everything. These two futures coexist, like seeds. Both possible, both real. And what determines which one grows are the daily choices of each human being. The present spoke within me. The future is not written in stone. Each soul is a lever for transformation. I cried, not out of sadness, but of a type of consciousness that weighs and liberates at the same time. I understood with absolute clarity that my life, any life, was not small. Every thought, every gesture, every word is a contribution to the destiny of the whole. And at that moment, I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. The presence was still with me, but now surrounded by a kind of expectation, as if something was about to happen. I felt that reality, however sublime it was not where I would remain. Not yet. There was a kind of goodbye hanging in the air, not a sad goodbye, but a surrender. Then, with the same clarity as all the other messages I received, came the one that would mark the end of my journey there. You must go back, share, show. What you saw needs to be remembered. I wanted to ask how. I wanted to know what to say, how to convince people who, like myself, before only believed in the tangible. But there was no time for questions. The call was firm, unpostponable. It was at that moment that I felt something pull me, hard. The light around me began to spin as if I were being sucked into a tunnel, made of energy. Spiritual reality unfolded at dizzying speed, and my consciousness seemed to compress, being re-embedded in a space that no longer contained everything that I now was. And then came the shock. Literally. Lightning went through my chest like an electrical explosion. My body arched, the pain returned, the senses, the weight, the flesh. Everything was dense, hard, limited, but I was back. I opened my eyes, gasping, choking, as if I had emerged from a deep sea. The fluorescent light in the hospital room was cold, almost violent after the bright light I had known. The first thing I saw was Elijah, kneeling next to me, sweating, his hands still shaking. When our eyes met, he froze. For an instant, the beer sound in the room disappeared. There was something in my gaze, he felt it, and I, without understanding how, managed to whisper, I saw everything. He didn't say anything, but his eyes became teary. He believed, even if he didn't understand. And I, still lying down with my chest hurting from the shock, knew with every cell of my being, I had returned with a mission. The following days were hazy. My body was still recovering from the damage of the embolism and cardiac arrest. I remained under observation, with limited visits, many tests, and cautious looks from the team. But my spirit was somewhere else. Sometimes I looked out the bedroom window and wondered if that phoenix sky, dyed in orange tones in the late afternoon, was the same one I knew before. Everything looked different. The sound, the colors, the people. It was as if physical reality was tinged with another dimension. My mind was spinning. How to tell that? How to explain? Who would believe? On the third night, I woke up feeling like I wasn't alone. I slowly sat down on the bed, and there she was, standing near the door, as if she had been watching me for some time. A middle-aged woman, dark hair tied into a simple bun, wearing ordinary clothes, jeans, and a beige blouse. But her eyes, there was something in her eyes that struck me immediately. She knew me. How the presence knew me. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked in a soft voice, but full of certainty. I nodded, unable to speak. My hands were shaking. She approached a little, calmly. "Some souls choose to stay. Others cannot return," she said, as if speaking of something she knew deeply. "But you came back because there is still time." I tried to ask who she was, but my mouth hesitated. Before I said anything, she smiled sweetly and said, "Time is shorter than you think." And then, she was gone. Just like that. He walked into the hallway and disappeared into the shadow of the hospital. The next morning, I asked the nursing staff if any visitors had been registered. I described the woman accurately. They searched everything. Nothing. No registration. No visitors looking like that. Not even cameras showed his entrance. Elijah listened to the report in silence. When I finished, he just murmured, "There are things that not even medicine can explain." And I knew without a doubt that that woman had been sent. A subtle reminder that my mission was just beginning. After discharge, I returned home a different person. The furniture, the books, the diplomas on the wall, everything seemed small, like memories from a past life. I spent the first few days in silence, trying to reconcile the woman who had left with the woman who had now returned. The feeling of displacement was profound. It was like trying to put on shoes that no longer fit. I started searching. I read everything I could find about near-death experiences. I talked to people who had already gone through something similar. Most remained silent for fear of judgment. Others, like me, still struggled to put into words something that transcended language. I was finding patterns. Many have seen the light. Others passed through the darkness. Some experienced absolute love. Others, abysmal terror. Over time, I understood. What you see on the other side may depend on the life lived here. I also looked into spiritual traditions, Christianity, Buddhism, Sufism, indigenous traditions. In each one, I found traces of what I had experienced. Love as a path, the connection between all beings, the real weight of our choices. I went back to work, but not like before. I started to see each patient as a universe in themselves. I could no longer treat symptoms. I needed to touch souls. Some colleagues laughed at my changes. Others started to avoid me, but some started to listen to me. I told my story for the first time in a small meeting between health professionals and patients. A nurse cried. A terminally ill patient held my hand and said, he finally felt peace. I realized that my mission, it wasn't proving anything. Remind people of who they are. Today, I live with a simple purpose. To love. Not an abstract love, but one that is expressed in small gestures, listening, forgiving, welcoming, telling the truth with compassion. Life on earth is just a fragment. We will not take our possessions nor our titles. We will only take the love we gave and the marks we left on others. That's why I say to anyone who wants to listen, death is not the end. Love never dies. And each soul has the power to illuminate the world. I know this because I died. And I came back to remind you. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.